Right.
Good to see you, brother. Where have you been and what's been happening?
Well, at least I've been back home, visit, and been back to Ethiopia by myself in April last year. And of course, I went back in December last year and January. What we did was I resumed the Nile Valley tours from Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, starting this last December.
You had discontinued for a little while.
Because of the war, the civil war that went on both in Ethiopia and Sudan. Now that both of these are finished, we went back and to a gala welcome from the people of the area.
There is a place where, and I think we always have to reiterate this because people have heard about you and many of them have heard you, but the length of your journey, and our theme this month is telling our story, but the length of your journey is a very critical one, I think, for people to understand. Let's go back through your story and the point at which you began to hear the kind of information that really set you on your life's path and your life's work.
I started in 1939 because of teachers in Puerto Rico. I was living in Puerto Rico. That's the homeland of my mother. Her birth was there. My father being Ethiopian, myself in Ethiopia, I came a small boy to the Caribbean and grew up between Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and so forth. While in high school and junior college and the college there, the constant bickering about the teachers and the constant racist statements about Africans not being civilized before the missionary come and all kinds of things, and especially a period called Saumau Bautismo Day, the day of St. John the Baptist, when the people go to the countryside to visit. That week, the school children are all encouraged to get up individually and say something about their background, because Puerto Rico, was conquered again from the indigenous people, the Caribs, and the African, the European, and the indigenous people settled there. But since the Spaniard didn't bring any women, they used the local woman or the African woman brought in, and they become the mother of what is called the Puerto Rican or the Latino. And this is typical of the whole of South America and the Caribbean Islands. Well, that caused me to go to Egypt. It'll be a long story. My father encouraging and so forth. And this started in 1939.
Now, what was your father saying to you about this story?
Well, when I went to complain to my father, he took a key from around his neck and gave it to me. He had that key there for a long time to a closet, china closet, where there were some books. He had other books, of course, as a practice, but these specifically were locked away. And I never check about them, but this day he gave me the key, and he says, take those books there, they're yours from now on. So when I went into the books, such as Book of the Dead and Calypsis, 2 volumes, and of that nature, I then immediately asked him, why now? Why you give me this book now? He said, because now you will know to appreciate it. If I gave you before, you would not. You would have just gone thumb a few pages and gone. Now you know you need this. And you need you got to read all the references stated in this book. And all the sub-notes, you must read them. And then you must read the sub-notes and references from the notes that you read and check up. And all those books. Now when you finish this, then tell me who has no history. And my brother, that's after he died. I haven't stopped reading it yet. and I haven't completed one book so far as the references is concerned. Because the references got references and got books.
Exactly, right.
And so that I started then, though I did not start out full-time as an Egyptologist or a numerologist. I started out as a civil engineer. I went and completed my work in civil engineering and worked at a small time even in Sanada Hunda in the base in Puerto Rico. I then went and took my master's in civil engineering and joint degree and in cultural anthropology in Havana. And then I left Havana, and I also took a doctorate in anthropology. I left Havana and went to Barcelona in Spain, and then took my master's in Moorish history. Subsequent to that, I took a law degree because that is required. Ethiopian culture, the oldest son must follow the father. In my case, my father only had one son, so I was the oldest son.
So you had to do whatever else you were doing and follow him as well.
I had to satisfy him.
Yeah.
Really, you're supposed to satisfy him immediately. I was being rude by not following my father's footsteps. But I guess being the West, he frowned about it, but he didn't say, well, you got to. But out of my understanding of culture and my obligation, I went and did it for him. And I practiced at it a little while, but there was some conflicts between my father and myself, and it was best to leave that area.
I see.
But then I started to do different work, teaching, working in the United Nations, UNESCO, and at the same time, in all of this, I am doing sideline. I'm writing. In 1969, in 1939, I wrote We the Black Jews. This, I have a copy here, just came out Friday gone.
This is the update now, right?
This is an update of the original. Original was a pamphlet in Spanish, and I did it down in Puerto Rico. Nosotros Severos Negros. And this here I did in 1981, I think, and I rewrote it. With this time with one cover, 2 volumes. I included this time the Hebrews of the Caribbean, Hebrews of West Africa, Hebrews of African America, and Hebrews from Africa, the quote-unquote Falashas, which is proper to Beta Israel.
And this is, Doc, we're saying the origin of this project then is 1939?
That's the origin of that project.
There is a place where, of course, and I noted very quickly that you dealt with this, that people in many instances forget that we are talking about a religion and not a race.
Oh no, the Jews are not a race. You got Kashim Jews from India. Look like any Indian you know. You have the Swedish Jew, blonde, look like any blonde Swede. You have the African Jew, of course, ourselves, look like any African you can see in Harlem. And you see, the myth of a Jewish race is a tremendous hoax. And the people who doing that, they're a race conveniently when they want to be, and another time they're Europeans, and another time they're Semites, and all kinds of different things. So you can't tie them down. But the fact is, all throughout Europe, the Jews were never a race. They wouldn't permit them to be of the white race, but now they come here, they can be of the white race, they can be of a thing called Semitic race, and that is a joke about Semitic race, because this is based upon Jewish mythology with flood, with Noah, and cursing one son, and the son Ham came out, his children came black. Then what were the other children? You know, what was the father, Noah, and the mother? And how could the father and mother have so many, the Semitic race, the Hamitic race, and that other kind of race, all kind of Termite race? They got all kind of stupidness, and I'm not supposed to say that because it's in the Bible, but the Bible got lies in it. It got truths, it got lies, it got a little of everything, love making, you know, every little thing is in there. But people treat it as if this is something coming from a person called God.
You, in the book that we're describing here, We the Black Jews, get into something which I think ultimately becomes very important for many of us in terms of understanding, and I think this is the point you were making earlier about culture, and you talked about being rebellious against your father in a certain way by not following what would have been the cultural track. You mentioned here present religious practices and customs. Many of us don't really know this information. You yourself, of course, grew up as a quote-unquote Hebrew. Can you take us through a bit of this, just for brothers and sisters to begin to understand?
Well, take for instance, when people hear of a bar mitzvah, they think of just a religious function. A bar mitzvah is a political act. It's when the boy is taking an oath that now he has grown to be a man. He's going to defend Israel. He must, when he goes to his community, he must build a hospital. He must have a school. He must have a shul. These are obligations he takes when he bar mitzvah. These are nationalistic obligations that he will sit with. And when you say this, some people don't want it that way because they kind of put them that they are doing political act under the label of religion. But bar mitzvah is political. It's just like rite of passage. Same kind of thing. The boy is doing his rite of passage.
more on this in terms of order of religious service and so forth. Just explain some of this to us.
Well, according to Western Jews, they have divided the Torah into certain periods of time when you're supposed to say certain parts of the Torah. And so that every Saturday in the year, they have singled out a particular part of the Torah to be read. But anybody could set that up. There's nothing coming from any God say you got to do something, say you got to do that. That's done by those who control Judaism. Right now in the world, Judaism is controlled by European Jews, even though they're the last in it. And it has, as I said, it doesn't have to do with race, a Jewish race, but it just so happens that the Jews in Europe, as a matter of fact, the majority came as a result of conversions of the Khazar people. There was a war going on between Christians and Muslims in Europe, just in the same places going on right now again. And they were caught in there and didn't want to come on either side. They want to be caught by Muslims or Christians. And they then converted to the new religion going through the area, a smaller group called the Jews. And these Khazars became Jews, and that's the origin of the European Jews.
Yeah, but the point seems to indicate that there is another time in which we are seeing this particular religion controlled by someone else.
Well, the religion has been controlled by other people, and it controlled other people too. Like the religion took over other people's land. Judaism was formed in the colonization and enslavement of the people of Canaan, and murder of the people of Canaan. They said that, remember that God told them to destroy their land, and they went and killed the 7 nations of people. The Amalekites, the Hittites, the Moabites, the Shemites, and all kind of them. 7 nations of people to the last man. Only other one other place we know such a genocide ever took place, and that's in Tasmania, when the British and the Irish and everybody kill out all the Tasmanians to the last man. And yet that is in the Torah, but nobody says this, and we keep talking about Holocaust, and we don't talk with the S at the end. And we don't talk about the Holocaust that was done right there in Israel by Hebrews. My mother and father had the same background, and when I talked to them about it, they would get angry. I said, well, you can talk about everybody has the Holocaust, but you want to talk when you put the Holocaust on other people. Of course, I didn't tell them point blank like that. I candy coated it, so I didn't get my teeth back. Give back to me in a plate.
Let's move down some of this, because I think it's interesting when you start to talk about the culture. And I noticed that when you identified the Falasha family, you put quotations around it. I'd like you to deal with that.
Because Falasha is like saying nigger. It is an Amharic word, not by the Ethiopian Hebrews. Falasha means don't touch me, strange people, funny, cowards, or anything of that nature. The people call ourselves Beta Israel, children of the house of Israel. Falasha is an Amharic word and a very ugly word.
And you're saying the correct identification would be Beta
Israel.
Okay,
yes.
I see. Now, take us through some of what you discuss in the book: structure and function, courtship and marriage, and women in the community, and monogamy and polygamy, and all that.
Right. Well, we follow Falasha. The rule follow Torah. Do not follow Talmud. The Talmud is an attempt to write an exact interpretation of what the Torah says. For example, most of us, at least at home, used to eat meat and milk together, but we did not boil the meat in its mother's milk. The Torah said, don't boil meat in its mother's milk. Don't cut the cattle and then take the meat that you cut off of him and boil it and cook it. They used to do that in the ancient times. The cattle would get sick, disease, and it will cause them to die. So instead of, if you tell the people medical health said don't do this, they're going to still do it. But if you tell them God said don't do it, then they won't do it. So they bring out this rule. And so that we, Falashas, didn't follow the Talmud. Europeans followed the Talmud. So many other Hebrews don't follow Talmud. As I said, Talmud is not Torah. You must follow Torah. You don't have to follow Talmud. Now, marriages and so forth, the marriage custom and vow, very strict. For instance, the night of the girl is required to come to the marriage bed a virgin. The boy, too, in his first, is expected to come to the marriage bed a virgin.
The male and female?
Male and female. The first marriage, you must come as a virgin to the bed. Now, this is very serious because let us say that the girl didn't come the next day after the wedding. She doesn't show the little piece of cloth she's given that she lies on, and it doesn't have the blood stain. They will stone her to death. That's the tradition. The Hebrews didn't kill people by hanging or by putting them on a cross. They stone you to death. And you're free to run if you could get away and you get out of the community, you're free. But you couldn't go to another Hebrew community because they will want to know where you're from and everything. By the time they find out, they start stoning you also. So you generally were lost to the community. They will sit and pray. The mother and father will say, as you dead, and you're dead to them. They will never call your name again. Well, the marriage custom is one of, again, strictly traditional. A person can marry your first cousin. As a matter of fact, that's preferred. They try to make you get married to your first cousin. Everything stay in the family. That's I found that even here in the Western world, the marriage of the first cousin is preferable, and many other cultures besides the Hebrew culture. Customs pertaining to food habits, what you call kashrut, you call kosher here. They have the same rigid, even more rigid than the West. Falasha don't eat steak because you can't. When you have steak, the meat is too thick to get all the blood out. So they will cut up the blood, the meat in small pieces so the salt can go through and take out the blood. You can't that way. The rituals are very strict. For instance, Falasha can't carry money in his pocket on the Shabbat. He can't have any relationship with his wife from sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday. Then Falasha still had in Ethiopia still had the animal sacrifice. Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, and one of the Passover. Women were not allowed to be at the sacrifice, only the men and the priests, because it's believed that her blood will mix with the sacrifice and then the sacrifice will not count. She did not stay, woman could not go into the synagogue. She can stay outside and look in, but she wasn't allowed in the synagogue, again for the same reason again, that her blood would do that. And it is a belief that when a woman had a child, the blood of the child exempt her and clean her from the sins that she might have had, whether the child is male or female. So that the rules of Falasha are way earlier than practiced by the European Hebrews.
We're going to take a break for a moment. I want to come back and talk about the marriage dimensions that you discuss in the book. You get into monogamy and polygamy, and we'll talk about that and more after this. Dr. Ben is with us inside of the GBE, kicking off African Heritage Month, our theme, Telling Our Story. We'll come back in just a moment. And us today, someone who certainly tells it better than most people that we've ever seen come across our history, and certainly has dedicated himself to it, as you've heard, from the year 1939. I'm speaking of Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben, we've got about 4 minutes before we go to news. Monogamy or polygamy within the context of this particular cultural system?
Well, Falashas are not compelled to do either. You have your option, and the option is based upon your ability to support a wife. My grandfather, my father's father, grandfather had 11 wives.
11 wives?
Yes, there's no restriction. We had a big farm and everything like that. My father is the first of 61 children. And then, well, all of those women were my grandmothers. And when I went back to Ethiopia the first time and I asked, who is my grandmother biologically, they asked me, why do I want to know? That is no business of mine. He said, your father is the only one to do that. You are going to bed with us? And then, what you want to know, who your father came from, he's here. And all of us is his mother. That was it. And so the polygamy or monogamy is forced on you according to the culture and your population. If you get an overwhelming amount of women, and you got monogamy, there are a lot of these women who, if you're following the monogamy, then it means thousands of these women die yearly without ever having had sexual intercourse. Thus, the purpose of the human being is to procreate, to spread the race. I use the word race, but the species. Now, if you don't procreate, how? If you got women going back all the time, never having been used, then what happened? The race eventually going to die. And to come up with something and say, no, if you get widows, again, they're going to be widows. You have to have polygamy to take the slack for those widows, as well as the women who might not have get married. After a certain age, a man doesn't want a woman, a young man, because he think that she's not going to procreate. So he gets a younger. But that woman would be denied the privilege of being a wife. So what? She would become the second wife. You know? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean the second wife doesn't mean she's a lesser woman or a lesser wife. It just means she's in second place.
Mm-hmm. There's a place, Doc, and certainly the arguments are compelling. They are logical. What is your feeling about sisters and their reactions to polygamy in this lifestyle, and also brothers who attempt to promote it?
I've had the question asked to me by I have 8 daughters and 4 sons, and I've had to deal with it in terms of my children. I told my daughters, if you are the wife and you're going to be a wife and not a harlot, then it's all right. I see nothing wrong with it, providing that you have that recognition. You must get the recognition. Either it's going to be recognition from the church, synagogue, mosque, or whatever it is, or from the state. But you need a recognition, not just the guy mouth, well, I marry you, darling, and you know we married, and don't worry about the white man law and things. That's a jive. That's joke. Mm-hmm. You have to have some place, and if it is not that, then you need a marriage contract that states your right, because marriage is nothing more than a ritual towards a contractual obligation for ownership. That if you die or I die, I am entitled to what you have without anybody else by virtue of this piece of paper. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. I mean, all this thing about what God made, let no man put us on, that's a joke. That's what the rabbi said, the priest said, the minister said, but they know, you see, none of these things, any God wrote anything. No, there's not a piece of thing in the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah, where God wrote. It's where man wrote or woman wrote and said God said it to some guy the other day, which nobody got his record either.
Dr. Ben is with us live at Talk Radio 1190 WLIB. There is lots more to come. It's African Heritage Month. Our theme is Telling Our Story. We'll talk more with Dr. Ben and give you the chance to join us too at 692-9542 and the nationwide toll-free number 1-800-332-1023. It's the GBE 93, more than a month for our history. Our theme is Telling Our Story. We'll take your calls at 692-9542 and the nationwide toll-free number 1-800-332-1023. We look forward to having your calls coming today from Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, Long Island, Staten Island, and New Jersey, upstate, out-of-state, and Connecticut as well. And just a quick note, and I say this only in the context of a very quick remark, and that is that we are very clear in the broadcast this morning on WLIB, I think, definitely indicated that there are provocateurs who, along with others, would perhaps like to castigate or do certain things towards WLIB to diminish the kind of power that the station has in the community. I say that to those of you who understand what we do and why we do what we do, and understand that there is a need for us to be very clear and on point and know that there are provocateurs who may attempt to utilize opportunities to castigate the station and to present a particular picture of the radio station. Understanding that, we certainly will handle ourselves accordingly. Talk Radio 1190 WLIB, you're inside of the GBE. Good afternoon.
Gary?
You're in the air with Dr. Ben. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a question for Dr. Ben.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Doctor, I have a question. With the falling away of the old religions that we as the people have a lot of stuff to be assimilated with, like Christianity and Orthodox Islam or whatnot, and with the rising of the more holistic type of religions like Egyptology, I would like to know, say, for instance, the different dynasties, say the Ramesses dynasty or the Hyksos dynasty, is there any danger of us falling into divisions again, saying, well, I believe in this dynasty and they have certain deities, or I believe in this dynasty and we have certain deities? How can we prevent that from happening again, like the Pentecostals and the Methodists?
I don't know what you mean by happening again. There was never the ancient Egyptians never had a religious problem.
I mean, us following today.
No, because ancient Egyptians added deities, god and goddesses, as they went along. And no god or goddess was put out or diminished. If they didn't use it, it was still there and they could always go back to it. So that's why they added deities.
So brother, you're saying, and Doc is saying, obviously, that we can't use the past as a model because what you just described didn't happen there. Right. But you're saying, as far as here,
right,
how do we prevent that from happening?
Right, yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Our gods are better than your gods.
You can't stop it because it's already here. And it's so, and in other words, the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims in America each teach that they got the only right way. And as long as you got a God system and a teaching that it is the only way, and that God comes directly to you, how you going to then change this at a later date? The people are really biased. You pick a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim. Each of them got the only way, and each of them are religious bigots.
Is there any way to unify all of the dynasties?
How are you going to do? What, you can't keep talking about dynasty. Dynasty got nothing to do with this. What dynasty are you talking about?
To the brother, let's take this maybe a step further, and thank you for the call. Doc, there's a place where it perhaps becomes important to establish that when we talk about, again, the so-called mystery systems, that we're talking really about the source for these religions that we're actually...
In the first place, the mystery system was not a religious system. At the mystery system, you had engineering, science, law. Every discipline you could take up was taught there. That complex was the education system. The Greeks are the one that called it the mystery system. It was mysterious to them because they didn't know what was going on. And when they came, they called it the mystery system. But the indigenous people just called it the education system. It was their education system. They saw nothing less mysterious about it because those who were the priests were the ones who ran everything, the one who taught everything, and they were learned. They take 40 years to train a priest.
Yes.
He studied everything there was without going back home. Now, he was there. That's it.
This is as in the case of Moses.
He came in at age 70 and he left at age 47. And if there was a Moses, and they said the Torah says he was learned in the ways of the Egyptian priests. Now, what are the ways of the Egyptian priests? 40 years of study, including the 10 Commandments plus 32 more, 32 more, 42 total. One of them, thou shalt not kill, and so forth. It was learning how to make a calendar, the first calendar, how to do mathematics, how to do science, all the medical papyrus, hundreds of medical papyrus before Hippocrates was born. It included all those things.
We're at Talk Radio 1190 WIB. You're inside of the GBE with Dr. Ben. Go right ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Brother Gary.
Good afternoon.
And one of my gods,
Right.
Dr. Ben. I would like to ask you, Dr. Ben, I've been troubled over this question of the first Hebrew, which was allegedly Abraham. It doesn't say that his dad and mama was, and I don't see...
Oh, yes, it says Terah was his father.
But it does say Abraham is the first Hebrew.
Yes, because his mother and father were not Hebrews. He by his baptism and acceptance of Yahweh, supposed to make him a Hebrew.
Well, what I'm getting at is I'm confused at how white folks become Hebrews.
Because green and pink and technicolor people could be Hebrew. The Hebrew religion is no more than the Christian religion, the Muslim religion, the Hindu religion. Is not a race. You don't have a Hebrew race. You don't have a Hebrew color. You have a Hebrew culture and religion.
So it's a matter of adoption rather than...
Yes, Sammy Davis was as much Hebrew as any white fellow you could see on the street, Ry Cohen.
The last thing I wanted to bring to your attention is there's a profoundly positive and highly contributive brother who teaches African culture and history. As a matter of fact, I think I've heard you and him together on WLIB. I learned by accident that this brother now is losing his sight, and he has nobody to cook for him. He has nobody to kind of watch.
You mean Dr. John Henry Clark?
Yes, and I am...
That's not necessarily true what you heard.
I'm appalled and aghast at this.
I said, you're not hearing. that's not necessarily true. The brother has helped. I know that personally. I just left him Saturday in Atlanta. We were together, and we see each other quite often. One of my daughters lives exactly the house right next to him, and she goes and shop for him. A number of brothers and sisters take care. No, he doesn't have minute-to-minute care because that doesn't exist. But in general care, there are people who look out for it, people in the first world, people, neighbors, and so forth. Nobody's going to let Dr. Clark walk by and don't give him aid if he suggests he needs it.
Well, that relieved me a great deal. I appreciate hearing that because I heard it the opposite, and I wanted to bring it up.
Well, brother, we're glad it was correct.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for the call. Talk Radio 1190, WLIB, you're in there with Dr. Ben. Good afternoon.
Gary, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm glad. I have two quick questions for the good doctor. One, I'd like to know how far back do the Phoenician Jews go?
It goes back as far as the biblical Moses. In Torah, in the book of Exodus, which is we could call Moses' book, it speaks of Moses marrying the daughter of the high priest of Ethiopia. In order to have the high priest of any country, you must have other priests, lower priests. In order to have priests, you got congregations. And Moses is run the Egyptian already in the 18th dynasty. You have the major figures in Judaism is Avram, Joseph, Moses. Those are your major earliest figures. As a matter of fact, the Torah, the Torah is said to be written by Moses, which cannot be. The Torah came out in around 700 BC from the Sanhedrin. Moses had already died about 700 years. It's done in his honor, but not that he wrote it.
I see. Well, I asked you that because I saw it on television, and Israeli Jews say that Phoenicians, when they did study, Phoenicians actually went back about 400 years, something to that effect.
I mean, they did everybody but themselves. They went back to the Khazars in Europe. They want to say, as again, what line of Judaism does they come from? Rabbi Obadiah Yosef, in 1971, he was the chief rabbi of the Sephardic community. That's meaning non-white Jews in Israel. People don't realize that most of the Jews in Israel are not white people.
I see.
They're non-white people, but they don't have the political power or the economic power.
One other question. There was a name of a people that you said that the European Jews came from during this...
Khazars.
Would you spell that for me?
Khazars. If you want to see the best story of this, read a book called The 13th Tribe. The 13th Tribe by Arthur Koetzler. Koetzler. And also read Are the Jews a Race by Kautsky, written in England in 1919.
Okay.
And of course they got other books. My book, We the Black Jews, Witness to the White Jewish Race Myth, is back out again. It just came out last Friday.
Then I'll pick it up.
All right, brother.
One other question. What year was that these Khazar people?
Wrong back there in the third, 4th century of the Common Era.
Thank you, bud.
And thank you for the call. Talk Radio 1190 WLIB. It's 20 minutes after the hour of 1 o'clock. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come right back. And Doc's going to take us into Brazil as well after this. We are back live at Talk Radio 1190 WLIB, the GBE 93, more than a month for our history. Our guest today, our elder and certainly a legendary historian, that is Dr. Ben. Doc, I wanted to get a bit on Brazil. And we're beginning to see more brothers and sisters who are making contact. Dr. Jeffries recently went down to Brazil, and more brothers and sisters here, they're beginning to experience it and beginning to recognize that it's a very important part of our culture in terms of the African experience in Brazil.
Yes. Well, I think that to understand Brazil, you understand who are the people. Basically, the people, most of the Africans who went to Brazil came from Central West Africa, all the way into Manicongo, which is today called Zaire, and other areas like that, Angola. And most of them were taken from that area to what is today called Brazil. Brazil has another history that no other place in the West has. It has the only European power, the only European king that moved from Europe and reigned as king was in Brazil, when Pedro V moved from Brazil to live and carry his throne to Brazil. Now, Brazil has...
Moved from Europe, you mean?
Yes,
Okay,
and ruled from Europe, from Brazil. There's another point, is that Brazil has the first independent democratic nation, Republican nation in the entire world, in the West. People say it's the United States. That's a joke. Palmyra was long before the United States. That's when the Africans revolted against the Portuguese, went up and established their own country up there up in the hills. When they lost to the Portuguese, is by the amount of Africans who had converted, and in the Portuguese army, just the same thing like what happened to the Maroons in Jamaica. The Maroons trounced the British, took the highlands, and only lost after conversion of many of their people to Christianity. And then when they were ready to fight, when British came to fight them, they were Christians, and so they didn't fight as Maroons, they fight as Christians to defend Christianity. That's the colonial thing that went along with the religion and the gun. Brazil, again, offers to us, in many cases, untarnished culture, in art, in different kinds of science, the herbal science, medical science, also in even defensive thing, the capoeira, all of that. But the tragedy in Brazil, however, is the stratification of quote-unquote race. They're not near civilized, the light, the brown, the chocolate, the... Well, 50
cocoa,
different... these are people calling themselves all these kind of names. Yeah. And when if all of them with all those names come to New York, or come to Georgia or Mississippi, will be told, nigger man, where you don't go sit down. You understand? But the Portuguese had created that in order to rule, and to rule effectively without a problem. If Brazil people could get away from the different stratifications, they will take over the country. The Africans of Brazil. They're enough to do it.
This whole issue of what happens when you begin to see our story from this global perspective, which brothers like you have certainly been promoting. I'm thinking about the educational system. What is your own feeling about what is occurring, or not what is occurring, we know what's occurring, what should be occurring? What constitutes what you would feel would be an African education?
An African education has to be one in which the African community, in being in charge of its own education, set the pattern of the culture. In other words, an African education must have Africa as the center. Just like a European education has Europe at the center, Asian education has Asia at the center. When the Chinese were not, quote-unquote, integrated, most every Chinese boy and girl in the afternoon went to a Chinese school to learn their Chinese culture. Unfortunately, African Americans were never subjected to that. When our churches and things should have been teaching us an African culture, they were more trying to make us as European as possible. First thing was to give us a piano lesson or a violin lesson, not for the sake of the instrument, but for the sake of getting the culture. I want you to play classical music, as if every music isn't classical. Every culture got classical music. It just means the highest music of the culture. The Japanese got classical music. The Germans got it. So did the Ghanaian got it. The highest cultural music. In other words, all these terminologies and categories that established by the Europeans to set themselves aside as better than other people, we have been able to take. Now, we have to have a system of education that show our God looking like ourselves. Every people got the God looking like them. It's silly to have a God looking like the guy who conquer you. Now, how are you going to get over that God? How are you going to think much of your mother and your father? And all the gods and all the deity and the saints look like the guy that conquer you. You want to be like the guy that conquer you. People who show strength being conquered by another group, the only ones that show any strength are those who retain the vision of their deity in terms of themselves.
We'll take a break at Talk Radio 1190 WIB. We'll come back and give you a bit of Doc's itinerary and what's coming up. He is always ever busy, as you know. We'll also have time for a few more telephone calls as we wrap up this afternoon side of the GBE, the Global Black Experience at Talk Radio 1190 WLIB. We'll take some of your telephone calls, but before we do that, I do want to make sure that we give you some idea of the itinerary of Dr. Ben. First of all, he is going to be at the Slave Theater on Wednesday. That is this Wednesday. It'll be at 7 p.m. Doc will be there on Wednesday. I'm looking at the schedule now. And, Doc, I see you're going to be down at Tuskegee a week from now, too, huh?
Yeah.
That should be great.
Yeah, it's about, I guess, my fourth time back at Tuskegee.
That is great. And then now I see that on Friday you're going to be with a group over in Yonkers?
Yes, Friday evening.
Okay.
That's Lionel up there. And that's the Yonkers study group.
The Yonkers study group.
That conducts that.
Okay, now on the 11th of February, you'll be at the New York Urban League State Office Building?
State Office Building for the New York Urban League. Okay. That will be 7 in the evening, too.
Okay, great. That's at 7. And I see Hostos Community College coming up.
In the Bronx.
And that's the 16th of February.
Yes, I think that's evening also.
Okay. And you'll be at Hofstra University?
Yes, Dr. Clark and myself.
That's the 15th?
Yeah, that's an annual...
Oh, you and Dr. Clark?
Yeah, that's an annual thing.
Okay, great. Let's see what else is happening in local, because I see, and let me just mention to those of you who are listening, what I'm skipping over are appearances in places like Boston, Los Angeles, California, University of California at Davis, and so forth. And I'm going to come down Newburgh, New York. Where's
Newburgh is up about, it's about an hour and 10 minutes ride.
Okay.
From New York City.
This is for the Black Student Union.
Yeah, but I'll take a train.
Okay. Let's see. And you'll be at Florida, Detroit, and Detroit is where you kind of wrap up, really, isn't it?
Detroit will be for the Al-Qiblan Association.
That's the brothers that I had a chance to meet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Good brothers, too.
Yeah, the brothers.
Yeah, that's all right. So a busy month, as usual, obviously, we note.
Yeah.
There's something that you do, and we'll start taking some telephone calls in the time that remains, but I want you to perhaps maybe give us a perspective on this issue, and you were talking about it just before news headline. The telling of our story. How do people move from, and I'm saying this, of course, in respect to the work of Dr. Carter G. Woodson in starting the week and what now has become the month, and now New York State has talked about this being the year, but people like yourself really, and as you indicated, going back to 1939, somehow saw fit in terms of all your work to make this a 365-day experience and commitment. I know that there are a lot of people who talk about the fact, well, I work, I do this, and so forth. I'd love to be able to be more into my culture, more into my history. Can you talk with us about how a person should approach the idea of making their history and their culture this kind of 365-day experience for them and for their families?
Well, in my case, it became probably, I wanted to use a word, but then it would probably make people figure I'm mentally ill. But it came almost an obsession. It is not just the history, his story of something. It's my story about myself and my people. His story has long gone out of my head. It is our story that I'm dealing with, not his version about me. That's why I go to the source. I went to the source to find out about me, firsthand. And it became so compelling that it became a way of life. When I read what the brothers of ancient time did and felt about their women, including mother, sister, and so forth, I found it to be the correct thing to do and the correct attitude. Therefore, my whole outlook on the African woman changed. When I saw her, like most of the young men, as a lay, somebody to lay, you know, the usual expression. As a young man, when I went to Egypt and looked and see how they treated, the ancients treated the African woman in those tombs, in the temples, what they did, how they made goddess and things to them and worshiped them and so forth, that they make the symbols which the West follow. For instance, the United States Justice Department is copied of the Egypt by the scale, the symbol of the scale, and the woman with a sword instead of ours don't have a sword. She has a feather in the hair and everything like that. Then I had to stop and ask myself, this crazy thing that you're doing in the West, your attitude towards women and the Adam and Eve thing, you got to drop that because that doesn't make sense. to persecute your woman on the basis that some woman named Eve committed the first sin and all that kind of thing, and your brothers have raised the woman to top shelf instead of 1,000 pipers. You got a sister up there top it. When they show me the African woman being represented of God, symbolic of the sun coming through her vagina in the morning with the rays and so forth, and going back in the evening and going back through her entire body, using the woman as that kind of an image. I mean, what could you do, brother? You're home. You're safe.
Well, you did something, Doc, and we'll take some telephone calls, but I know that I speak for many brothers and sisters, and I find it interesting whenever I travel. And, I'll wear my cartouche, right? And what happens is I will almost inevitably, if I go to any kind of black event in the country, I'm going to meet somebody in the room who was one on a trip with Dr. Ben to Egypt. It is something that I observe more and more consciously because I almost anticipate it now. When I go into the room, it's kind of like, you're looking around and see, who's in here who made the trip, It's that kind of thing, And Doc, I want to just say publicly to you how thankful and appreciative I am, because I first became aware of you through a tape that I got at the African Street Festival. It almost caused me to have a car accident. Mm-hmm. When I was listening to tape, I just pulled over to the side of the road to listen. And then some...
For 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to say is that is it true that when a black woman have a baby and after she have that baby she's pregnant again and that baby is drinking the milk while the other baby's in her stomach, does that make the baby that is born already goes backwards?
Backwards? How?
Yeah, like see, I'm married to a Haitian woman that she's in her country. They say that when the baby drinks the milk of the breast while she already carrying a baby, that causes the other baby that is already drinking the milk to go backwards in knowledge, or something that she learns or he learns, and then he loses it and it goes backwards as a baby again.
I'm going to tell you, if there's an old wife tale, that is the biggest one I've heard.
Yeah.
All right, brother.
Okay.
All right. So Doc says he classifies it under the category of old wives' tales. All right. So he says don't worry about it. All right. Good enough, brother. Thank you for the call. 151 at Talk Radio WLIB. Let's go inside of the studio for a call right now. Thank you for joining us in the experience.
Hotep.
Hotep.
The question I would like to ask to Dr. Ben is the origin of homosexuality and the origin of polyandry, if ever.
Well, I don't know about the origin of homosexuality since I don't believe in it. And I don't tolerate it. And I wouldn't compromise this position. I told him, you come to my house and wiggle your behind, you through my door you go. Now, if you come to my house and behave like a man in this house, you can come. But if you're going to wiggle and swaggle like a woman, you'll get out of my house. Or I put you out of my house. And I don't care who don't like it. Because I stand in a position that as an African, we believe in the procreation of the race. And you cannot have procreation of race, a male penis entering a male anus. It's not a preferred lifestyle. If one will tell me that a vagina and an anus is the same thing, then somebody crazy, and I know it is me.
What about the polyandry, Doc?
Polyandry came when the society had too many men and not enough women. Then the women share the men because they wanted enough women to go around. So she get 2, 3, 4. It is condition forces most of these marriage patterns.
As you were saying.
Where was that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, caller. Go ahead.
Where was that? In Europe or
India have polyandry right now. They have been 1 or 2 African groups, but they do not exist anymore. Where the men have gone off to war and so. But it's really practiced in Africa there, and it's really practiced. Nothing wrong with it. It just so happens that most societies now have more men. I mean, enough men, so that what they do is to double up on the women.
So, Doc, if I'm hearing you correctly, then you're saying that the polyandry and the polygamy are emerging from social conditions.
Social conditions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, to the caller, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Talk Radio 1198 WIB. We'll take a quick and final break before we wrap it up inside of the GBE with Dr. Ben. We're at Talk Radio 1190 WLIB inside of the GBE, the Global Black Experience. Our final few moments, and they've moved all too quickly for Dr. Ben joining us inside of the GBE today. Don't forget, again, he'll be appearing at the Slade Theater this Wednesday. And I'm actually going to ask for something here, and Dr. Lewis is in studio with us, maybe a telephone number for people who want to get more of that itinerary, because we always will get calls from people who say they'd like to follow up. Maybe they might miss Doc Wednesday at the Slade or other days. Oh, yeah, Dr. Lewis, why don't you give us that?
You can, it's 212-281-1700, 212-281-1700 if you want more information on Dr. Ben's itinerary and schedule.
Repeat it one more time, Dr. Lewis.
212-281-1700.
Okay, great. And that's again for Dr. Ben's itinerary. For those of you who are understanding, again, his appearances are going to run through at least pretty close to the middle and a little bit past that of the month, with a few New York schedules in there as well. And some of you may be out of town, may want to catch him on some of those out-of-town engagements across the country as well. Doc, I got to get this question in, and I said again, you look great. How are you feeling?
I feel rather fine. I hope that my feeling is what it is, because
Yes.
I don't want to say I feel that good and then come out here and collapse.
Yes.
But I feel as good as as a man, a 73-year-old man could feel.
73, Doc.
Yeah, the sister. Well, sisters take care of you, brother.
Boy,
When
I'm
you get to
serious.
73.
You look great, Doc. You look great.
What I attribute to good African women. Wherever I go, they take care of me.
Yeah, well, they're doing a good job, brother. Matter of fact, a great job.
Yeah, brother. They don't stop that.
For sure. Dr. Ben, thanks for being with us today, brother.
It's my pleasure, brother.
All right, Dr. Ben joining us today inside of the experience. On this date in history,
The meeting, because it was a tremendous.
Here in and joint drinking and in cultural anthropology in Havana. And then I left Havana, and I also took a doctorate in anthropology. I left Havana and went to Barcelona in Spain, and then took my master's in Moorish history. Subsequent to that, I took a law degree because that is required. Ethiopian culture, the oldest son must follow the father. In my case, my father only had one son, so I was the oldest son.
so you had to do whatever else you were doing and follow him as well.
I had to satisfy him.
Yeah.
Really, you're supposed to satisfy him immediately. I was being rude by not following my father's footsteps. But I guess being the West, he frowned about it, but he didn't say, well, you got to. But out of my understanding of culture and my obligation, I went and did it for him. And I practiced at it a little while, but there was some conflicts between my father and myself, and it was best to leave that area.
I see.
But then I started to do different work, teaching, working in the United Nations, UNESCO, and at the same time, in all of this, I am doing sideline. I think I'm writing. In 1969, I wrote. In 1939, I wrote "We the Black Jews." This I have a copy here. Just came out Friday gone.
This is the update now, right?
This is an update of the original. Original was a pamphlet in Spanish, and I did it down in Puerto Rico. Nosotros Severos Negro, and this here I did in 1981, I think, and I rewrote it with this time with one cover, 2 volumes. I included this time the Hebrews of the Caribbean, Hebrews of West Africa, Hebrews of African America, and Hebrews from Africa, the quote-unquote Falashas, which is proper to Beta Israel.
And this is, Doc, we're saying the origin of this project then is 1939?
That's the origin of that project.
There is a place where, of course, and I noted very quickly that you dealt with this, that people in many instances forget that we are talking about a religion and not a race.
Oh no, the Jews are not a race. You got Kashim Jews from India. Look like any Indian you know. You have the Swedish Jew, blonde, look like any blonde Swede. You have the African Jew, of course, ourselves, look like any African you can see in Harlem. And you see, the myth of a Jewish race is a tremendous hoax. And the people who are doing that, they're a race conveniently when they want to be, and another time they're Europeans, and another time they're Semites, and all kinds of different things. So you can't tie them down. But the fact is, all throughout Europe, the Jews were never erased where there were some books. He had other books, of course, as a practice, but these specifically were locked away. And I never check about them, but this day he says, he gave me the key, and he says, take those books there, they're yours from now on. So when I went into the books, such as Book of the Dead and Calypsis, 2 volumes, and of that nature, I then immediately asked him, why now? Why you give me this book now? He said, because now you will know to appreciate it. If I gave you before, you would not. You would have just gone, thumb a few pages and gone. Now you know you need this. Mm-hmm. And you need you got to read all the references stated in this book. And all the sub-notes, you must read them. And then you must read the sub-notes and references from the notes that you read and check up. And all those books. Now when you finish this, then tell me who has no history. Mm-hmm. And you know, my brother, that's from 39. I haven't stopped reading it yet. and I haven't completed one book so far as the references is concerned. Mm-hmm. Because the references got references in the book.
Exactly, right.
And
right.
So that I started then, though I did not start out full-time as an Egyptologist or a numerologist. I started out as a civil engineer. Mm-hmm. I went and completed my work in civil engineering and worked at a small time even in Ensenada Honda in the base in Puerto Rico. I then went and took my master's in civil engineering and so forth. While in high school and junior college and the college there, the constant bickering about the teachers and the constant racist statements about Africans not being civilized before the missionary come and all kinds of things, and especially a period called São Bautismo Day, the day of St. John the Baptist, when the people go to the countryside to visit. That week, the school children are all encouraged to get up individually and say something about their background, because Puerto Rico, was conquered again from the indigenous people, the Caribs, and the African, the European, and the indigenous people settled there. But since the Spaniard didn't bring any women, they used the local woman or the African woman brought in, and they become the mother of what is called the Puerto Rican or the Latino. And this is typical of the whole of South America and the Caribbean Islands. Well, that caused me to go to Egypt. It'll be a long story. My father encouraging and so forth. And this started in 1939.
Now, what was your father saying to you about this story?
Well, when I went to complain to my father, he took a key from around his neck and gave it to me. He had that key there for a long time to a closet, china closet. Right.
Good to see you, brother. Where have you been and what's been happening?
Well, at least I've been back home, visit, and been back to Ethiopia by myself in April last year. Mm-hmm. And of course, I went back in December last year and January. What we did was I resumed the Nile Valley tours from Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, starting this last December.
You had discontinued for a little while.
Because of the war, the civil war that went on both in Ethiopia and Sudan. Now that both of these are finished, we went back and to a gala welcome from the people of the area.
Mm. There is a place where, and I think we always have to reiterate this because people have heard about you and many of them have heard you, but the length of your journey, and our theme this month is telling our story, but the length of your journey is a very critical one, I think, for people to understand. Let's go back through your story and the point at which you began to hear the kind of information that really set you on your life's path and your life's work.
I started in 1939 because of teachers in Puerto Rico. I was living in Puerto Rico. That's the homeland of my mother. Her birth was there. My father being Ethiopian, myself in Ethiopia, I came a small boy to the Caribbean and grew up between